Pablo Escobar, born December 1, 1949 in Rio Negro, Colombia, rose from petty crime to become the most powerful drug lord in history. By the 1980s, he led the Medellin cartel, controlling as much as 80% of the global cocaine trade. His empire smuggled an estimated 15 tons of cocaine into the United States every day, generating billions of dollars annually. But his fortune was built on terror. Escobar ordered assassinations of politicians, judges, police, and journalists, and unleashed car bombs and massacres that claimed thousands of lives. As violence escalated, the Colombian government, backed by U.S. agencies like the DEA, launched an all-out manhunt. On December 2, 1993, just one day after his 44th birthday, Escobar was tracked down in Medellin. In a final rooftop shootout, the man once called the King of Cocaine was gunned down, ending a reign that had left a nation in blood and fear. His death closed one of the darkest chapters in Colombia's history. Ted Bundy, a name that still sends shivers through American history. Between 1974 and 1978, this seemingly charismatic law student prowled across multiple states: Washington, Utah, Colorado, and Florida, luring young women with charm, fake injuries, and a disarming smile. Behind that facade was a predator who abducted, assaulted, and murdered at least 30 women, though experts believe the true number may be far higher. His methods were calculated, targeting women who resembled an ex-girlfriend, approaching them in public, then striking when they least expected it. Bundy was first arrested in 1975 in Utah, but he repeatedly escaped custody, continuing his killing spree. His final crimes in Florida included the brutal Chi Omega sorority murders on January 15, 1978. Captured soon after, Bundy's trials drew massive media attention, with him often representing himself in court. On January 24, 1989, at Florida State Prison, Ted Bundy was executed in the electric chair, ending the life of one of America's most manipulative and sadistic killers. His story remains a dark warning of how evil can hide in plain sight. Alphonse Capone, ruthless, untouchable, and the face of organized crime in 1920s Chicago. Rising to power during America's Prohibition era, Capone built a criminal empire on bootlegging, illegal gambling, and prostitution, raking in an estimated $100 million a year. His reign was marked by brazen violence, none more infamous than the St. Valentine's Day Massacre on February 14, 1929, when 7 rival gang members were gunned down in broad daylight, an event that shocked the nation. For years, police and federal agents failed to pin the murders on him, as witnesses disappeared and jurors were bribed. But in 1931, it wasn't murder that brought him down. It was tax evasion. Convicted and sentenced to 11 years in federal prison, Capone's power crumbled. He spent his final years battling syphilis-related dementia, dying on January 25, 1947. By the way, I'd like to know where you're watching from. If you find these stories interesting, please leave a comment now, letting me know where you're watching from. I'd love to say hello to you in the comments. Adolf Eichmann, born March 19, 1906, in Solingen, Germany, rose through the ranks of the Nazi SS to become one of the central architects of the Holocaust. As head of the Gestapo's Jewish Affairs Office during World War II, he orchestrated the systematic deportation of millions of Jews from across Nazi-occupied Europe to extermination camps such as Auschwitz and Treblinka. Eichmann meticulously organized train schedules, quotas, and logistics, making mass murder a bureaucratic process. After Germany's defeat in 1945, he escaped Allied capture, fleeing to Argentina under a false identity. For over a decade, he lived in hiding, until Israeli intelligence agents tracked him down in 1960. In a covert operation, Mossad abducted Eichmann and smuggled him to Israel, where he stood trial in 1961 for crimes against humanity and war crimes. The trial, broadcast worldwide, revealed the cold precision behind the Holocaust's machinery. Eichmann was found guilty and, on June 1, 1962, he was executed by hanging, the only civil execution in Israel's history. His legacy remains as one of history's most infamous examples of bureaucratic evil. Joaquin Guzman, born April 4, 1957, in La Tuna, Sinaloa, Mexico, rose from poverty to become the ruthless leader of the Sinaloa cartel. one of the most powerful drug trafficking organizations in history. He was popularly known as El Chapo. From the late 1980s through the 2010s, El Chapo oversaw a global narcotics empire, smuggling tons of cocaine, heroin, methamphetamine, and marijuana into the United States, while fueling violent cartel wars that claimed tens of thousands of lives. His reign was marked by staggering brutality, corruption at the highest levels, and a reputation for the impossible, including 2 dramatic prison escapes. In 2001, he fled Puente Grande prison hidden in a laundry cart, and in 2015, he tunneled out of Altiplano prison through a mile-long underground passage. But in January 2016, his luck ran out. Captured after a firefight in Los Mochis, El Chapo was extradited to the U.S. the following year. In 2019, he was convicted on multiple federal charges, including drug trafficking and money laundering, and sentenced to life plus 30 years, now locked away in the Supermax prison ADX Florence, where escape is no longer an option. Charles Manson. In the late 1960s, California became the backdrop for one of America's most infamous cult leaders, Charles Manson. Born in 1934, Manson was a career criminal who reinvented himself as a guru, leading a group known as the Manson family. Isolated on a ranch outside Los Angeles, he manipulated followers with apocalyptic visions and a warped ideology he called Helter Skelter. On the nights of August 8th and 9th, 1969, under Manson's orders, his followers carried out brutal murders, most infamously killing actress Sharon Tate, 8 months pregnant, along with 4 others in her Los Angeles home. The next night, supermarket executive Leno LaBianca and his wife, Rosemary, were slaughtered in similar fashion. Investigators initially struggled to connect the crimes until a member of the family was arrested for an unrelated offense, leading police to the killers and their leader. In 1971, Manson and several followers were convicted of first-degree murder and conspiracy to commit murder, receiving death sentences later commuted to life in prison. Manson died behind bars in 2017, his name forever tied to one of the darkest chapters in American crime history, Jack the Ripper. In the autumn of 1888, the fog-shrouded streets of London's Whitechapel district became the hunting ground of an unidentified killer history would call Jack the Ripper. Over just a few months, from August to November, at least 5 women, Marianne Nichols, Annie Chapman, Elizabeth Stride, Catherine Eddowes, and Mary Jane Kelly, were brutally murdered, their bodies mutilated with a precision that suggested both skill and sadism. The killings struck fear into the working-class neighborhoods, as each crime seemed bolder than the last, often committed in the open air under the cover of darkness. Scotland Yard launched one of the largest manhunts of the Victorian era, interviewing hundreds, following countless leads, and even receiving taunting letters signed Jack the Ripper. Yet despite mounting public pressure and sensational headlines, the killer was never identified. More than 135 years later, the case remains unsolved, an enduring mystery that continues to haunt criminal history. By the way, I'm going to be posting a lot more interesting videos on the channel. I'll greatly appreciate it if you could show support by liking this video and subscribing to the channel. Thank you very much. Jeffrey Dahmer, a name forever linked to one of the most disturbing crime sprees in American history. Between 1978 and 1991, in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, Dahmer lured 17 men and boys to their deaths. His crimes went beyond murder. He committed acts of sexual assault, dismemberment, and cannibalism, shocking the nation when the details emerged. For years, Dahmer evaded suspicion, often targeting vulnerable victims and exploiting gaps in police oversight. His reign of terror ended on July 22, 1991, when one intended victim escaped and flagged down officers, leading police to Dahmer's apartment. Inside, they found photographs of dismembered bodies, human remains preserved in acid, and a freezer filled with body parts. Convicted of 15 murders in February 1992, Dahmer was sentenced to 15 consecutive life terms without parole, but his life ended violently in prison on November 28, 1994, when he was beaten to death by a fellow inmate, closing the final chapter on one of America's most notorious killers. Osama bin Laden, born March 10, 1957, in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, was the founder and leader of Al-Qaeda, the extremist network responsible for the deadliest terrorist attack in U.S. history. On September 11, 2001, 19 Al-Qaeda operatives hijacked 4 commercial airliners, crashing 2 into New York's Twin Towers, 1 into the Pentagon, and another into a Pennsylvania field after passengers fought back. Nearly 3,000 people were killed, and the world was thrust into a new era of global counterterrorism. Bin Laden, already wanted for the 1998 U.S. Embassy bombings in Kenya and Tanzania, became the FBI's most wanted fugitive. For nearly a decade, he evaded capture, hiding along the Afghanistan-Pakistan border under heavy protection. The search culminated on May 2, 2011, when U.S. Navy SEALs raided his compound in Abbottabad, Pakistan. In a brief but intense firefight, bin Laden was killed, ending one of the most extensive manhunts in history, but leaving a legacy of conflict that still echoes today. John Wayne Gacy, once a respected Chicago contractor and community volunteer, hid a monstrous double life. Between 1972 and 1978, he lured young men and boys to his home, often under the guise of offering work or friendship. By day, he was known for dressing as Pogo the Clown at children's parties. By night, he became a predator, subjecting his victims to assault, torture, and ultimately, murder. Most were buried in a crawl space beneath his suburban home, and others were discarded in nearby rivers. The case began to unravel in December 1978, when 15-year-old Robert Peast vanished after meeting Gacy about a job. A police search uncovered the stench of death beneath his house, revealing the remains of 29 victims. In total, Gacy was convicted of killing 33 young men and boys. On March 13, 1980, he was sentenced to death, and after years of appeals, he was executed by lethal injection on May 10, 1994. His crimes remain one of the most disturbing chapters in American criminal history. Frank Abagnale Jr., born April 27, 1948 in Bronxville, New York, became one of the most legendary con artists in modern history. By the age of 21, he had successfully posed as a Pan Am pilot, a Georgia doctor, and a Louisiana lawyer, all without a single legitimate qualification. Between 1964 and 1969, Abagnale forged and cashed millions of dollars worth of checks across 26 countries, slipping through airports and banks with charm, precision, and a forged smile. His boldest move? Flying over 1 million miles by posing as an airline pilot, collecting free travel and pay he never earned. But in 1969, his run came to an end when French police, tipped off by an Air France stewardess, arrested him in Montpellier. After serving time in France, Sweden, and finally the United States, Abagnale was released in 1974 under the condition that he would help the FBI combat fraud. Today, his life story remains immortalized in the film Catch Me If You Can, a reminder of how far deception can go before the law catches up. Harold Shipman, a trusted British family doctor in Greater Manchester, practiced medicine from the 1970s until 1998, but behind the facade of care, he was quietly becoming one of the deadliest serial killers in history. Over 2 decades, Shipman murdered more than 200 of his patients, most of them elderly women, by administering lethal doses of diamorphine. He often signed their death certificates himself, masking the killings as natural causes. The pattern began to unravel in 1998 when the suspicious death of 81-year-old Kathleen Grundy, whose will had been bizarrely altered in Shipman's favor, triggered a police investigation. Exhumation revealed lethal morphine levels, and further inquiries uncovered a staggering trail of unexplained deaths. In January 2000, Shipman was convicted of 15 murders, though official inquiries later confirmed his true toll was far higher. Sentenced to life in prison without parole, he hanged himself in his cell on January 13, 2004, leaving behind a legacy of betrayal that shook Britain's trust in its medical system forever. Richard Ramirez. In the summer of 1984, California was gripped by fear. Richard Ramirez, later dubbed the Night Stalker, prowled the streets of Los Angeles and San Francisco, striking under the cover of darkness. Between June 1984 and August 1985, Ramirez broke into homes, committing a string of brutal murders, sexual assaults, and burglaries. His victims ranged from young children to the elderly, targeted seemingly at random, and his crimes were marked by extreme violence, sadistic rituals, and satanic symbols. The terror escalated until August 24, 1985, when a fingerprint lifted from a stolen car finally identified him. Just days later, on August 31st, a mob of East Los Angeles residents recognized and chased Ramirez down, holding him until police arrived. In 1989, he was convicted of 13 murders, 11 sexual assaults, and 14 burglaries, receiving 19 death sentences. Richard Ramirez would remain on death row at San Quentin until his death from cancer in 2013, his name forever tied to one of California's darkest chapters. Bernie Madoff, once a respected Wall Street icon, ran one of the most devastating financial crimes in history. From the early 1990s until his arrest in December 2008, operating out of New York City, Madoff built a facade of success through his investment firm, Bernard L. Madoff Investment Securities. Behind the polished image, he orchestrated a massive Ponzi scheme, using new investors' money to pay returns to earlier clients. For years, his steady profits attracted celebrities, charities, and ordinary families, luring them into what would become a $65 billion fraud on paper, the largest in history. The illusion collapsed during the 2008 financial crisis, when clients tried to withdraw billions, and Madoff could no longer keep the deception afloat. On December 11, 2008, he was arrested by the FBI and later confessed to the decades-long scam. In 2009, Madoff was sentenced to 150 years in federal prison. He died behind bars in April 2021, leaving behind a legacy of shattered lives, ruined fortunes, and a warning of how unchecked trust can lead to unimaginable loss. Vlad III, known to history as Vlad the Impaler, ruled Wallachia in present-day Romania during 3 separate reigns between 1448 and 1476. Born in 1431, he became infamous for his unrelenting cruelty in defending his territory from both internal rivals and the advancing Ottoman Empire. Vlad's favored method of punishment was impalement, driving a sharpened stake through his enemies and leaving their bodies to rot in public as a warning. Contemporary accounts describe entire forests of the dead, with thousands of victims, including captured soldiers, political opponents, and criminals. His most infamous act came in 1462, when he reportedly ordered the impalement of over 20,000 Ottoman prisoners outside the city of Târgoviște, horrifying Sultan Mehmed II's forces into retreat. While revered by some as a fierce defender of Christian Europe, others viewed him as a sadistic tyrant. No formal investigation existed in the modern sense, but his reign ended violently. Vlad was killed in battle in late 1476, his head sent to Constantinople as proof of his death. Centuries later, his legend would inspire Bram Stoker's fictional Count Dracula, cementing his place as one of history's most notorious figures. Griselda Blanco, known as the cocaine godmother, rose to power in the late 1970s and early 1980s, orchestrating one of the most violent eras in Miami's history. Born in Cartagena, Colombia, in 1943, she built a billion-dollar cocaine empire, smuggling massive quantities into the United States. Her reign was marked by ruthless efficiency. Authorities linked her to dozens of murders, many carried out in broad daylight, as she eliminated rivals and enforced loyalty with fear. Blanco was instrumental in pioneering the cocaine cowboys era, fueling the Miami drug wars that left the streets soaked in blood. In 1985, after years of surveillance, the DEA arrested her in California on drug trafficking charges, later adding murder indictments in Florida. Convicted and sentenced to lengthy prison terms, she served nearly 2 decades before being deported to Colombia in 2004. But her story ended as violently as it began. In 2012, at age 69, Griselda Blanco was gunned down outside a butcher shop in Medellin, a final act of retribution in the world she once ruled. Seung-Hui Cho. On April 16, 2007, in Blacksburg, Virginia, 23-year-old Seung-Hui Cho, a senior at Virginia Tech, carried out one of the deadliest mass shootings in U.S. history. Armed with two semi-automatic pistols, Cho first entered West Ambler Johnston Hall around 7:15 a.m., killing two students. 2 hours later, he chained the doors of Norris Hall shut, then moved methodically through classrooms, opening fire on students and faculty. In just 11 minutes, he murdered 30 more people and wounded 17 others before turning the gun on himself as police closed in. Investigators later uncovered a package Cho had mailed to NBC News between the attacks, containing videos, photos, and a manifesto filled with disturbing grievances and delusional justifications. The massacre prompted nationwide debates on gun control, mental health, and campus security. Herman Webster Mudgett, better known as H. H. Holmes, terrorized Chicago in the early 1890s, earning the grim title of America's first documented serial killer. During the 1893 World's Columbian Exposition, Holmes constructed a 3-story labyrinth known as the Murder Castle in the city's Englewood neighborhood. To outsiders, it appeared to be a hotel for fairgoers. Inside, it was a nightmare. Soundproof rooms, hidden passageways, trap doors, and a basement outfitted for dissection and cremation. Holmes lured victims, often young women seeking work, into this maze, where many vanished without a trace. Suspicion began to close in after a business partner, Benjamin Pitezel, was found dead under mysterious circumstances in 1894. Holmes was arrested in Boston, and a chilling investigation tied him to multiple murders. While Holmes confessed to 27 killings, authorities believe the true number may be far higher. He was convicted of Pitezel's murder and hanged in Philadelphia on May 7, 1896, leaving behind a legacy of horror that still haunts American criminal history. James Whitey Bulger, born September 3, 1929, in Boston, Massachusetts, rose from South Boston's tough streets to become one of America's most feared crime bosses. From the 1970s to the mid-1990s, he led the Winter Hill Gang, controlling the city's drug trade, extortion rackets, and loan sharking operations, all while secretly working as an FBI informant, feeding agents information on rival gangs. His double life enabled him to eliminate competition and stay one step ahead of law enforcement. But in 1994, after learning of a pending indictment, Bulger vanished, triggering one of the largest manhunts in U.S. history. For 16 years, he evaded capture, living under aliases and moving between safe houses across the country. Finally, on June 22, 2011, he was arrested in Santa Monica, California, alongside his longtime girlfriend, Catherine Gregg. Convicted in 2013 of 31 counts, including 11 murders, he was sentenced to 2 life terms plus 5 years. In October 2018, at age 89, Whitey Bulger was brutally beaten to death inside a federal prison in West Virginia, closing the final chapter on one of America's most notorious underworld figures. Idi Amin, known as the Butcher of Uganda, seized power in a military coup in January 1971, ruling the East African nation with an iron fist until 1979. At first, he portrayed himself as a populist leader, but behind the smiles lay a reign of terror. Over 8 brutal years, his regime was responsible for the deaths of an estimated 300,000 people, marked by political assassinations, ethnic persecution, and widespread torture. Amin expelled Uganda's Asian community in 1972, seizing their businesses and plunging the economy into collapse. His rule was fueled by paranoia, eliminating rivals within the army and silencing anyone who dared speak out. Internationally, his erratic behavior and shifting alliances earned him notoriety, while internally, fear gripped the population. In 1978, after a disastrous invasion of Tanzania, Ugandan exiles and Tanzanian forces launched a counteroffensive, capturing Kampala in April 1979. Amin fled into exile, first to Libya, then settling in Saudi Arabia, where he lived in comfortable seclusion until his death in 2003, never facing trial for the atrocities committed under his rule. If you enjoyed this, I'm going to be posting a lot more interesting videos on the channel. I'd greatly appreciate it if you could like and subscribe. Thank you very much.